Good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you are, everybody, and welcome to Deep Dive Dragonflies as Bioindicators with Kevin Monroe. This is one of the first SSU's Dig into Nature Spring 2022 educational series events. My name is Carrie Winninger, and I am the Outreach and Communications Lead with the Center for Environmental Inquiry at Sonoma State University, and I will be your host today. So let me know if there's anything that you need. Just go ahead and type that in the chat. First of all, we want to acknowledge, honor, and make visible that our preserves are the ancestral lands of Native peoples, and we encourage you to learn more about this at cei.sonoma.edu. Currently, I am speaking to you from the ancestral lands of the Coast Miwok in Marin County. This spring marks our return to providing events on the preserves, but we're also providing virtual ones like this in response to a high level of interest, and to having people like Kevin join us from all the way across the United States. First thing, if everybody can please take a moment to type your full name into the chat box. This is going to be our sign-in sheet today. So just go ahead and type that in for me. Sometimes Zoom names are different than your actual name. Our presenter is Kevin Monroe, former executive director of the Laguna de Santa Rosa Foundation near here, and now the Long Island Preserve Director for the Nature Conservancy. Kevin has created and delivered several events for the center, from Insects After Dark to creating climate sanctuaries for wildlife, and we are so happy to have him back. Before we begin, I'd like to tell you just a little bit about the center. We are here to empower students of all ages and disciplines to solve the environmental challenges of the North Bay. We want to turn education into action. We do this by providing direct outdoor learning experiences on our three preserves: Fairfield Osborne Preserve on Sonoma Mountain in Rohnert Park, Galbraith Wildlands Preserve in southern Mendocino County, and Los Guilicos in Kenwood. We provide classes, workshops, and tours that focus on experiential learning and skill building. Additionally, we make the SSU preserves open to anyone interested in education, research, and creative inquiry. So just let us know if you want to get on there and do any of those activities. We invest in real-world projects, working with faculty, community, and students all across disciplines to develop projects that are focused on finding solutions to North Bay environmental challenges. And we create long-term multi-organizational partnerships that generate the resources and funding needed to chip away at those complex issues surrounding water, fire, technology, and other topics. So I'm going to go ahead and put a link in the chat just in case you don't know how to access our website. This is going to be cei.sonoma.edu. What we do at the center is mobilize faculty, students, and community to solve these complex environmental challenges. And we invite you to join our diverse community of learners and problem solvers, no matter your background. So today we're going to focus in on dragonflies and what their presence or absence tells us about the health of our ecosystem. So as questions come up to you, please just put them in the chat. And Kevin has scheduled a couple of stops during his presentation to address your questions, and I will group them for him as appropriate. Kevin and I will stay on the Zoom for a little bit afterwards if you have more questions and ideas, and we're happy to talk about that. So feel free to email me or Margot or Kevin after the event for any follow-ups. I'm going to go put my email in the chat, and it would be different than the address that you got with your confirmation email, which is Margot's email. Either one of those are perfectly fine. So with that, I'm excited to turn it over to Kevin.
Hi, thanks, Carrie. Good to see everybody. I was having some problems with my screen freezing, which is why I stopped the show, but I'm going to start it again. So I'll go ahead and share my screen and get started here. Can everybody see the PowerPoint? Awesome.
Yes.
Okay, let's get started at the beginning here. Excellent. So as Carrie mentioned, feel free to put your questions in the chat, and I will stop at several points during the presentation and be sure to answer them. So first off, what the heck is a dragonfly? I feel like that's always a good place to start, right? So dragonflies are in the class Insecta, insects, which includes beetles, moths, butterflies, bees, all those good critters. And they are in the order Odonata. Classes are broken up into orders. One of those orders is Odonata, that's dragonflies. and damselflies. The order Odonata includes both. We're going to focus on the suborder Anisoptera today. Damselflies are in Zygoptera. We're going to focus on the suborder Anisoptera today, which is dragonflies. So how do you tell them apart? That's usually the first question I get. Damselflies are skinnier, they're just more slender, they have sort of weaker flight. Dragonflies are larger, more robust, heavier, much stronger, faster, higher flight. And then I'm going to address these other points in the pictures, because pictures tell 1,000 words, right? So you can see the damselfly at the top is skinnier. And look at its eyes. Its eyes are on either side of its head like a hammerhead shark, so to speak, where the dragonfly's eyes touch. You see down in the bottom picture, their eyes are so huge, they cover almost their whole face. That's one way to tell them apart. Look at the wings. Damselfly wings always touch. They're folded above, behind their back. Dragonfly's wings are always out like wings on an airplane. So the wings and the eyes are an easy way to tell them apart, besides just kind of different in basic body shape. So here you can see which one this is. Obviously, the damselflies, it's so much skinnier, and they have the wings folded behind their back and the eyes in either head like a hammerhead shark. And then again, here's the dragonfly with the much larger eyes and the wings straight out. So people often ask how many dragonflies there are as well. There's going to be about 30 at any natural area that you visit. Could be 20, could be 40, but that's sort of a good number if you're in a large park or natural area. There's 307 species in North America, and there's over 3,600 worldwide. And another 3, they've been around for over 300 million years. So 3 is just a good number with dragonflies. One of the things that's special about them is their wings. They do have 4 wings, which most insects have, but what makes them special is all wings move independently from one another. They can pivot, they can fly over 40 miles an hour, and their wings can beat 50 times per second, only a little bit slower than a hummingbird's. They can also fly in all directions, including upside down and backwards, which no other insect can do as well. So this sort of shows the pivoting joints and the 4 independent wings. You can kind of visualize that here. And then they have stigmas, which is a little dry packet of colored blood towards the end of their wings that acts as a counterbalance and makes it easier for them to fly. Without that, their wings are sort of too flimsy. That little counterbalance is important. Then their wings are made up of these solid, rigid veins, which give them strength, kind of like the hollow bones of a bird's wings. Same sort of idea, strong but light. Other flight adaptations are that they have serrated wing edges that helps reduce turbulence. And then the hairs in their antenna actually detect wind direction and speed. And then their eyes are amazing. They have these compound eyes, which are made up of 28,000 separate units called ommatidia, also sometimes called ommatidium. In addition to that, they have 3 separate little simple eyes called ocelli, which we think helps them sense light or dark. They can see almost 360 degrees around themselves, and they can see polarized and ultraviolet light, which we cannot. And this is the close-up picture. You can sort of see those individual ommatidia, little hexagon shapes. It's 28,000 in each one of those compound eyes. And then their legs are actually quite important, kind of like on a hawk, a falcon, or an owl. They really use those legs to do a lot of their hunting. So their legs are sort of skewered towards the front of their thorax, and they use it to make a basket to pull insects out of the air, almost like a baleen in a whale's mouth. And then they also have these spines on their legs, which you can see there. And here's a close-up that shows some of those spines again, almost like the talons on a hawk. And that's how they capture their prey, not with their mouths, but with those spiny and hairy legs. And this is often how they perch. They're just waiting to fly out and wrap their legs like grappling hooks around other dragonflies, moths, bees, beetles, all sorts of insects that they feed on. Sexual dimorphism, this is just telling the male from the female. And as you can see here, male and female of the same species can look really different. Those top two little red guys are autumn meadowhawks. That could be brother and sister. But see how different they are? They're different colors on the abdomen. The female has a much wider abdomen at the base for holding eggs. The two lower species are widow skimmers. Again, that could be brother and sister, same species, very different wing pattern. So you not only have to learn the species, you have to learn the male and female. So really important part of what makes dragonflies such good bioindicators is that their life cycle is a combination of terrestrial and aquatic habitat needs, because the female lays eggs underwater, like these little tiny sort of rice-shaped white dots you see on that underwater plant photo. They live underwater for months, sometimes even years, as gill-breathing larvae. Then they come out, shed their exoskeleton, become adults. So they need land and water. So it's one reason they're good as environmental assessment indicators, because they need those two habitat types. Important thing to understand about them is the males go down to the aquatic habitat where they think the females are going to want to lay their eggs. So each species has slightly different aquatic habitats in which they lay their eggs, and the male knows that. So he goes to the right corner of stream or vernal pool or river or pond or swamp and sets up territory, defends it from the other males. It's all about real estate. He finds the real estate that he thinks the ladies are going to come to. He waits for her. And then when she comes to the place she wants to lay her eggs, that's when he mates with her. And he will defend with his life that territory from other males, like this little guy, making it clear this is his little corner of the marsh. So these are other pictures of males displaying on territory, waiting for females to come in to mate with them and waiting to fight off any males that try to take that corner of the stream or the swamp or the marsh. So it's all about location. It's all about being able to see who's coming and to be seen, so other males know to stay away. So they're often perched on the tallest weed or branch or cattail or rock so they can see. So the females do not really want to deal with the aggressive males until it's time to mate. So the females will hang out, and the young males, they will hang out in meadows and forests and other places away from their breeding territory. So the males are the ones waiting down at the water, but the females and immature males are far from water until they're ready to mate. Then they go down there. So when they're mating, they're in this thing called the wheel position. And it's unique. Only dragonflies and damselflies have this from that order Odonata. So the female has to connect her reproductive organs to the male's reproductive organs, which is why she has to put the bottom of her abdomen, sort of the tip of her tail, underneath his thorax. So the reproductive organs can come together and they're mating. And they have to fly. They have to hang out like that for a while. Sometimes it'll be over an hour of them flying around in this wheel position. And it's just another picture of it. Again, you'll often see them together like this, and they somehow fly, even though she's upside down and backwards, they'll fly for up to an hour like this while they're mating. Now, the male wants to guard the female to make sure that his reproductive material, his sperm, is being protected. So he will do mate guarding, which means he latches onto the back of her head with the tip of his abdomen. He holds on to her to protect her from other males, because other males can come mate with her, and they have a special appendage where they remove the sperm of the previous male. They can actually remove the sperm of the previous male and put their own in there. So he's guarding her basically to guard his sperm, and that's called tandem. Sometimes they hold on like they are in this picture. Sometimes they just hover nearby and attack any male that comes close. Ovipositing is what the female does. That's the act of laying eggs. This particular dragonfly is laying eggs by inserting the eggs almost like a hypodermic needle into the underwater stem of this plant. Other species of dragonflies will simply tap the water You've probably seen that before, where dragonflies simply tap the water, and each time they do that, eggs are coming out. Or sometimes they'll get their eggs in a ball and simply fling them out over the pond or fling them into vegetation. So there's several different techniques. Just a close up again, you can see him holding on to the back of her head, which looks pretty uncomfortable, while she is inserting her eggs underwater. So when these larvae come out of their eggs, which can be anywhere from a couple days to a month before they hatch, they then come out as these nymphs or larvae that are underwater and breathe through gills. So very different from their air-breathing adults. They're incredible predators, really impressive predators. They can eat fish, even little salamanders. They have this amazing jaw that folds out and captures things. And that's when most of their life happens, is as larvae underwater. As adults, they're only alive for a year at the most, often just a month or so. As larvae, they can be underwater for a few weeks to up to 8 years. When they decide to come out, whether it's 2 weeks after hatching or 8 years later, they will crawl a stem, usually around dawn because there's less birds, like right before dawn. And they will climb up and they will split out of their old exoskeleton. And then when they pop out, they have wings. They're now breathing from the air and they fly away. That process can take a couple hours, kind of like cicadas, as you've ever seen them do that when they crawl up out of the ground. So what do dragonfly adults eat? The larvae eat just about any aquatic thing they can get their little jaws on, but the adults are going to basically between one or two groups. They're either going to eat flying insects, and I've listed some of them there, and that's called hawking, or they do what's called gleaning, where they pull these various insect species off of leaves. Sometimes they'll be at the tops of trees pulling beetles or caterpillars off. That's gleaning. There are some dragonflies that actually specialize in plucking spiders from their webs. They'll fly down a stream and pluck a spider from every web. What eats them? Well, just about anything that can catch them and fit them into their mouths, including robber flies in that lower right picture, praying mantids, or spiders. Spiders will sort of, it's payback. The dragonflies eat spiders, but spiders eat dragonflies too. And then really everything else. Lots of birds, flycatchers, sandpipers. There are some falcons and kites that specialize in catching dragonflies. Frogs, lizards. I've seen frogs leap up out of the water and catch them. A possum or raccoon or rat walking along a stream edge might eat them, and other dragonflies. The predator becomes prey. Most dragonflies eat other dragonflies, and some dragonflies specialize in just eating other dragonflies. First thing they do is eat the head off, because they don't want to get bitten by their meal, right? You don't want breakfast biting you back. So the first thing they do is they eat their head. And even dragonflies, even these dragons, these flying dragons, they have parasites like everything else. Fairy wasps parasitize a dragonfly's egg. And the little wasp larvae live inside the dragonfly egg. Then there are also mites, in this case, thousands of mites sucking the blood from the abdomen of this dragonfly. Other interesting things about them, they're basically cold-blooded. That's not quite the right term, but they're cold-blooded. Think of like a lizard or a snake. So they have to warm themselves in the morning. They'll do it by basking, like these dragonflies on a tree. Or sometimes if they get too hot, they'll go into the obelisk position, where they stick their abdomen straight up in the air to dissipate heat, like the ears on a jackrabbit in the desert. That's if they're getting too hot. And then wing whirring, that lower picture, they will shiver. Just like when we get cold and we shiver to warm our muscles, they will shiver or whir their wings in order to warm up their wing muscles. Okay, so I was talking kind of fast there to make up for some of the technological difficulties. This is a good spot to stop for any questions. Does anybody have any questions about anything they've seen so far?
I do see a few in the chat if you'd like me to read those out loud.
Thank you, Carrie. That'd be wonderful.
Okay, so the first question was, do dragonflies eat mosquitoes?
Yeah. one of my favorite questions, because the answer is yes, 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 they do. And that's one of the reasons it's such a beneficial, wildlife group. They protect us from West Nile virus, right? And yellow fever and malaria and all those things. If you remove dragonflies, there'd probably be thousands of people every year that would get sick that don't because of the dragonfly. So yes, they love mosquitoes.
Wow. Next question is, are there any invasive Odonata species?
Gosh, another great question. I am not aware of any, which is really bizarre because we know now dragonflies can fly across the ocean. Dragonflies have landed on boats in the middle of the Pacific Ocean and in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, landed on them. And they've been seen in planes. Well, not in planes, but near planes.
Out the window.
But to our knowledge, I've never heard of any invasive dragonfly. Good question.
I see a hand raised. Allie, would you like to ask your question?
Hey, yes. Thank you so much, everyone. It's great to see ya. And I actually came on this Dig into Nature because I saw a meme on social media, and it claimed that dragonflies will fake their own death to avoid an unwanted partner. And I decided that I'd better find out from you guys instead of relying on a meme for my education.
Gosh, I don't know. I don't know the answer to that question. But it wouldn't surprise me. I know there are many insects that specifically use the technique of playing dead to escape all sorts of issues, including being part of an unwanted courtship or protecting themselves from predators. So there are insects that play dead. So it wouldn't surprise me at all if dragonflies do that. That's not as crazy as it sounds.
Great question. And our last question in the chat is, why do they need to fly during mating as opposed to sitting still?
Sure, because they're quite tasty and birds love to eat them. So if they are sitting still, I guess the idea is that if they're sitting still, it's more likely for a bird that's sitting in a tree looking to be able to catch them and eat them. And the bird gets two for the price of one. Mm-hmm. But if they're flying, it's a moving target. They're constantly moving around. Also flying, they have to fly down to the water to lay eggs. So they may be flying around looking for the best real estate, the best corner of stream or pond or marsh. So those two reasons.
We do have one more that just popped up in the chat. If we want to go on a hike to see a high diversity of species, where should we go and when?
Yeah, sure. We'll touch on that a little bit more later, but basically I'd say May through September. Okay. July and August are sort of the high point, but May through September. And you want to go to sunny aquatic habitats with lots of perching places. Mm. So the edge of a sunny pond, the edge of a sunny marsh, the edge of a sunny stream. They have to have sun. They're like flying solar panels. So if you go to a shady pond, shady stream, you're not going to see them. So it's a sunny aquatic habitat with lots of plants for them to perch on.
And by aquatic, do you mean freshwater?
Yes, thank you. There's only one species of dragonfly that breeds in salt waters in North America called a seaside dragonlet. And they're only out for a couple months in the summer. They're a little teeny black dragonfly. So every other of the 307 species in North America are all freshwater species.
For those people who know Osborne Preserve well, Allie's asking a question about where at Osborne Preserve might be a good place to see dragonflies. And she's wondering, Moving Mountain Trail, that's the one that goes up to the top and passes Kelly Pond.
So I know I saw them up at the very top at Kelly Pond, and on the way up, there are a couple places where there are small marshy pools, almost like large puddles that get sun for maybe half of the day. And I've seen them there. Uh-huh. Also in the meadows around the visitor center, the stream dragonflies and the marsh dragonflies, there's a stream and marsh next to the visitor center there at Osborne. They will come up to the meadow, the sunny area around the visitor center to feed because there's so many insects there. So you can walk the stream or go down to the marsh, or you can just look in the meadow around the visitor center, and that's where they're hunting and feeding.
Not surprising, given that they can fly out to ships in the middle of the ocean, that they would travel a little to go get food.
Yes. Some species have been known to fly 100 miles per day. Per day. They get caught up in a wind current, and 100 miles later, they're somewhere else.
Wow. Well, that's all the questions we have now.
Okay, excellent. Those were fantastic questions. Thank you. It makes it more fun for me. So we're going to switch gears a little bit and talk about dragonflies' relationship with their habitat. So you probably all know what a watershed is. Basically, a watershed is an area that sheds all of its water to one point. So this picture is the Laguna de Santa Rosa watershed, which means any drop of water that falls anywhere within this boundary flows into the Laguna wetlands. And then it's made up of little mini watersheds. There's the Windsor Creek watershed, the Mark West Creek watershed. And of course, they're all part of the Russian River watershed, which goes into the Pacific Ocean. So it's like Russian dolls. Little watersheds go into medium watersheds, which go into bigger watersheds. Every single place on the planet is part of a watershed. There's no place that isn't, because any place where the water falls, it's going to drain into a lower point. Understanding dragonflies' diversity and dragonfly health and monitoring dragonflies is all about understanding watersheds. So because they have those terrestrial and aquatic habitat needs, it means that they are amazing watershed ambassadors and amazing watershed bioindicators. We can use dragonflies to talk to people and teach to people about the water and land connections, since they have that life cycle. So they're a fantastic sort of teachable moment. We can use dragonflies to learn and teach about habitat diversity and quality and wildlife corridors. Water quality, because those larvae are living in the water. If the water gets polluted, all of a sudden you see less adult dragonflies. They're really important beneficial natural predators. We talked about them eating mosquitoes. They're an essential part of food chains, because not only do they eat lots of different things, lots of things eat them. So they're just a great way to learn about watersheds and sort of environmental assessments and bioindicators. Perfect citizen science biota, which is just a group of living things, because they're in so many different habitats. So you can get a group of college kids or high school kids or adult volunteers, and you can go to almost any habitat, including even a desert, and there will be dragonflies. They're relatively easy, or at least possible, to ID. You know, you're never going to see more than about 20 to 40 in any one area, so that makes them manageable to ID, good for citizen science. And they tell us a lot about ecosystem health and diversity, as we've learned. So it's a great group of animals to use for citizen science projects or environmental assessments for those reasons. So this just sort of accentuates what I was just saying. You know, dragonflies are all about watershed health. That's, you know, there's such a strong connection there. You take water quality, habitat diversity, and food web health, and you put that all together, and what comes out at the other end of the watershed? Dragonfly diversity. If you have those three things, you will have dragonfly diversity. So that makes them great environmental indicators or bioindicators. Again, because of that aquatic terrestrial life cycle. So let's learn a little bit about what they do need. First of all, there are dragonfly habitat generalists and habitat specialists. A habitat generalist is like a crow, right? You see crows in the desert, at the beach, in the middle of a city, at a golf course, suburbia, deep in a boreal forests, on the Arctic. You see crows and ravens everywhere. They're habitat generalists. Do you see flamingos everywhere? No, because they have very specific habitat needs. There are dragonflies that are like crows and dragonflies that are like mosquitoes. There are some dragonfly species that could be in all four of these habitats: marsh, pond, stream, woodland, pool. They don't care. This is good for them. Then there are other species of that 307 in the US that are very specific. They only will live in a forest stream and none of these other habitats, or they'll only be at the edge of a marsh and nowhere else. It comes down to what are their needs for water, amount of sunlight, and structure. And by structure, I mean vegetation, rocks, and substrate like sand, gravel, mud, pebbles. What are their needs in those three areas? And that dictates whether they're a habitat generalist or habitat specialist. So a little more about that. We've sort of gone over this just to kind of bring the point home. So most dragonflies prefer sunny environments. So you're mostly looking at water and structure when you're trying to decide what different species need. Again, if they are a habitat generalist, they're adaptable, they're flexible. They could be in a pond or a river or a stream. They're going to adapt to different habitats, And you might find them, like this blue dasher, in a pond, a stream, or a swamp. They can handle mud or silt or leaves, low water quality. They eat just about any aquatic invertebrate. They're generalists. Then you have the habitat specialist. They're less adaptable. They're pretty inflexible when it comes to their water and structure needs. Their food is very specific. These species will only maybe eat a certain type of beetle or a certain type of fly. Their larvae can only live in streams that have pebbles, but not streams that have mud. So they're very picky and specific. They're like the Goldilocks of the dragonflies. This least clubtail is an example. They have to have sand and pebbles as a substrate. They can't handle mud or silt or leaves. They need higher water quality like trout, and they only eat in certain types of stream insect larvae. So it's the specialist that you can use especially well as bioindicators for environmental assessments. So here's an example, arrowhead spiketail. I spent years creating a dragonfly website when I lived in Virginia, and it took me 3 years to find this stupid dragonfly because I was looking in the wrong type of habitat. And as you can see, I won't go over that list there, but you can see how specific they are. They're so picky. If the habitat isn't perfect, there are no arrowhead spiketails. So they are habitat specialists. These two as well, the tiger spiketail, the spine-crowned clubtail, so picky. Tiger spiketail doesn't even like streams. They like seeps, which means the water can't be more than about 2 inches deep, and it's barely even flowing, but it does have to be flowing. They're just super, super picky. So they're rare and difficult. It's a great way of telling whether you have a healthy forest seep, because that's the only place you can find them. Spine-crowned clubtail is very picky about the type of stream that it lives in. So these are intense habitat specialists. So how do you want to use this if you are trying to use them as bioindicators or for habitat assessments? How do you start? Well, and I'll mention again, as mentioned before, this whole thing is being recorded. So don't feel you have to memorize all this. You can go back and watch all this at your leisure and pause it and read all this on your own time. So learn the dragonfly species of your particular area. It's not going to be more than about 30 or so. Talk with local dragonfly experts. And then in California, consider what I've listed here as California habitat specialists. The whole family of clubtails, there's 7 families of dragonflies, okay? The whole family of clubtails is made up of habitat specialists. Very few of them are generalists. So if you just learn the clubtails in your particular area in California, you're a long way to being able to use them as bioindicators. If you want to expand a little bit, you can also learn the genus of meadowhawks. That's completely separate because they're mostly specialists as well. You want to go a little further, learn the genus of mosaic darners. And you can also add these specific 3 species that I've listed there. So all that combined is about 15. So then you don't even have to learn all 30, you just learn about 15, and you're on your way to being able to use them as bioindicators. What are your methods? I suggest starting by going out and doing a basic diversity count. Just count how many species are in your town or park or backyard. Don't worry about whether they're generalists or specialists. Just start to learn them. I would suggest focusing on adults. If you really want to get good at this, you have to catch, or you don't have to, but you can catch and identify the larva, which you have to really use a microscope to do. But sometimes it's really hard to find the adults. So some scientists that are using dragonflies as bioindicators completely ignore the adults. They just look underwater for the larvae and identify them. You can even just identify their dried skins. You don't have to ever look at a living adult or a larva. You can just collect their skins, look at them underneath the microscope. There are keys and field guides to do this. So that's one method for learning about them. Applications, it can help you make land management decisions, education and research decisions, or advocacy for stopping an area from being developed if the dragonflies tell you it's a very high quality wetland. So there's lots of ways to use these animals to learn more about the wetlands and then use that to help make decisions about how healthy or unhealthy the wetlands in your area are. So where do you look for these critters. Again, they need water structure and sunlight. So you're looking for where those three things come together, like in this picture. And I've circled the places you're going to find the dragonflies. All three of these circles have places to perch. They're in the sun on a sunny day, and they're close to water. So if you went down to this area, you wouldn't have to look everywhere. You'd go look at the fence posts, the tree branches, the leaves hanging out over the water, and the tallest grass weeds next to the water. It's all about sunny edge. Any habitat you go to, you're looking to sunny edge, the sunny edge of a forest, meadow, lake, pond, stream. That's where you're going to find these critters. So a little more about where and when to find them. In Mendocino, Sonoma, and Marin counties, there are dragonflies all year. Even in January, February, there are 1 or 2 species that you can find if you're lucky. But in colder places, like in Northern California, it's April through October. The adult dragonflies will die during the winter. Larvae, of course, are year-round. They're underwater, living all year. Regardless, wherever you are, May and September are really the best times for looking for them. That's when the most dragonflies are out, so it'll be most rewarding for you. I've listed 11 sites here that are really, really good right there in Sonoma County, which I'm assuming is where most of you are from. These 11 sites are really good for dragonflies. I've been to each one of these. I've led dragonfly programs there. They're great. 3 of them, as you can see, are CEI SSU, Fairfield Osborne, Galbraith, and the SSU campus is phenomenal. They love hunting in those big areas around the campus. You can see thousands of them. Remember, again, even though there's 307 species in North America, you're not going to have to learn more than about 30 in any given area. So you can do that. That's not too intimidating. And, it's a great way to get exercise. It's good habitat assessments, bioindicators, as we've talked about. It's a good citizen science wildlife, and it's great for photography. So you can just go out and take pictures of them.
Kevin, can I bring up, someone
Please.
suggested a location actually in the chat to go see dragonflies up in Lake County. Anderson Marsh State Historic Park in Lake County. The Cache Creek Trail is a really good place to walk, about a half-mile walk, including a boardwalk, level Q2 is what Gay Henry says. Thank you for that input.
Thank you. I've been there once, actually, and that is a great spot for dragonflies. Thank you for adding that. Yeah, and again, anywhere in California that's got water, sunlight, and somewhere to perch, you're going to be able to find some.
There is a question that relates to this. I'm wondering if you can take the time.
That's fine. Yeah, go ahead.
Someone says, you mentioned they could be found in the desert. Where would you find them there?
Sure. So even in a desert, it rains occasionally, right? It just rains a lot less. So even in a desert system, you're going to have an oasis. You're going to have a stream. You're going to have a seasonal pool. I've been to deserts in Arizona where there are streams, there are pools that are there almost all year round, even though in the summer they may shrink to 3 feet by 3 feet. There's still dragonfly larvae. So even in a desert, you're going to find that one little aquatic habitat. They can fly for up to 100 miles, right? So even if you're in a desert 100 miles from water, if there's insects for them to eat, you could still see them swarming, feeding on those insects on their way to the next oasis.
Great, thank you.
Sure. So some things to look for when you're trying to identify them. It's easy to really focus on color, but there's more than that. It's behavior. Some dragonflies perch constantly. Other dragonfly species are constantly flying and they almost never perch. So once you learn that, just by watching them, you can help tell, is that a skimmer or is that a darner? Size, don't worry about that too much. Size can be confusing, but I would basically say, is it really, really tiny? Is it sort of average or is it huge? And sort of keep that in your mind. Color and markings. There's a very small group of dragonflies that have color on their wings. So the first thing you can do is there any markings on the wing? If it's perching, if it's small and it has markings on its wings, that narrows it down to like 3 species of dragonflies in Sonoma County. So it's process of elimination by these first glance field marks. Context is everything. Where are you seeing it? You look in a dragonfly field guide and it lists species, but a lot of them are not in Sonoma County. So just keep track of the dragonflies that are actually in your state and your county. Date and season. There are some dragonflies that are only out for 3 weeks in May. So if you're out in August, you don't even have to worry about looking at that species in the field guide. So keep track of the month and week that you see a dragonfly. That can narrow it way down to what species is actually there. When you go to your habitat, let's say a stream, you want to not only look in the stream for stream dragonflies, but in the meadows next to the stream. This is actually a female red rock skimmer at Fairfield Osborne in a little meadow area next to the stream. So don't just look in the wetland, look in the sunny areas adjacent to the wetland. That's often where they're feeding. So context clues can be really helpful. These 3 dragonflies look so similar, don't they? They're all medium-sized. They all perch a lot. And they all have a lot of red on them, right? Well, that seems more confusing than it actually is. And I'm going to explain in the next picture. And we'll also talk about the lower darner picture in the next picture. So you see in this slide, the neon skimmer, which looks almost identical to the flame skimmer, is only in Central and Southern California. It's not in Sonoma County, so you don't have to worry about how much it looks like a flame skimmer. There are no neon skimmers in Northern California. So just knowing a dragonfly's range helps. Red rock skimmers only live in clean, rocky streams. So if you're seeing a red colored skimmer at a pond, you don't have to worry about whether it's a red rock skimmer or it's not. You know it's going to be the flame skimmer. So context is everything. This darner, I caught this on a field trip there in California, and we were seeing lots of California darners. So I told everybody this is a California darner and was explaining to everybody why it was, but I wasn't really looking at it. I was just assuming because we'd seen so many. Somebody sent me this close-up picture later and told me I'd misidentified it because I hadn't really looked at it. I was just assuming because all the other dragonflies around us were California darners. So don't make assumptions, look closely at the dragonfly, and then you can tell it might not be what you think it is. Okay, any other questions in the chat before we move on to talking about conservation and research?
We sure do. We have 3 questions. So the first one, I saw the photo of the dragonfly larva grasping a fish. Do they eat just a bite of the soft tissue or more, like any bone parts? I wonder who eats the rest of the fish if they don't eat it all.
That is such a good question. I don't think, and I could be wrong, I don't think their jaws are strong enough to break up bone. So my guess is they're going to strip that fish down and leave the backbone, kind of like we would. And there's so much living down at the mud level of a pond or a river. So there's going to be snails and all sorts of decomposers that will come and eat every inch of those fish bones. Nothing will go to waste. But yeah, my guess is they probably can't quite digest the bones, but everything else.
Next question. I always wonder about habitat specialists and how evolutionarily it's advantageous to be so picky. I guess no other dragonflies will go there, so it's a niche.
Right. Yeah, good question. I think it does come down to a niche. You know, there are some species of woodpeckers, the red-cockaded woodpecker, that only lives in forests that have pines of a special species, and the trees all have to be a certain age, but it means they've cornered that market. So you go to forests in South Carolina with this one species of pine that are all this certain age, and the red-cockaded woodpeckers dominate it. So it's going to be like that for dragonflies. It's a niche, just like you said. They get so good at living in a 3-inch forest seep that as long as they can find a 3-inch forest seep, they totally dominate that habitat.
Because others would probably not bother.
Exactly.
Great.
Exactly.
Next question. Have you found evidence of climate change in dragonfly populations?
Yes, that's a really good question. Of course, climate change affects everything, doesn't it, right? We're learning that it just absolutely affects everything. Dragonflies are coming out earlier. So one way to know what dragonfly you're looking at is to have early and late dates. If you're looking for a red rock skimmer, you look at field guides, they tell you, well, red rock skimmers never come out before April 15th.
That's changing, huh?
All those dates we have to kind of throw out now because of climate change. So dragonflies are coming out days, weeks, maybe half a month earlier than we're used to because of climate change. Also, climate change often means more drought. And so dragonflies that live in shallow habitats vernal pools, shallow marshes. A lot of dragonflies prefer really shallow aquatic habitats. Their populations aren't doing as well because a really bad drought's going to dry that out.
Yeah.
So those are two ways that climate change has an effect.
We had 3 questions, now we have 5. Do you have time for 2 more?
Sure.
Have you come across prehistoric remains of dragonflies?
I haven't, but yes, there have been fossils found of dragonflies that mean we know that they've been around for over 300 million years. So by the time dinosaurs came around, dragonflies were already old. There were dragonflies that were like the size of a red-tailed hawk that had like 3-foot wingspans and like 5 or 6 foot long bodies. So if you had a small cat or a terrier, they might have been able to pick it up.
And those were very vicious, I assume, right?
Yeah, I think we'd still be safe, but I don't know, toddlers might not.
Yeah.
So yeah, there have been 300 million year old fossils found.
And the next question is absolutely perfect for this slide, talking about ID apps. So one person is talking about iNaturalist to look up identifications, and then somebody else suggested this Dragonfly ID app that you are clearly about to tell us about.
Well, there's so many good ones. iNaturalist is fantastic. There's an online website called Bug Guide. I think there's another one called Find a Bug. There's so many. This is one of the best because it's connected to Odonata Central. Mm-hmm. And Odonata Central is probably the best national, if not international, dragonfly clearinghouse website. That's where all the top international scientists go to, is Odonata Central. And this app that works on any smartphone was made by them and populates their website. So you're participating with literally thousands of world-class scientists when you're using this app. I won't go into a lot of detail, but there's the website here for finding it. This will be in the recording you can look at. It's really, really good. You can use the color of the dragonfly, the habitat, everything, and it will sort of tell you what you're looking at.
One thing I like about iNaturalist is that it says this species has been found in this location. Yes. So are there things like that in this app that help you throw it down based on things other than just the visual?
Totally. This one does that too. It'll tell you what are the dragonflies that have been seen right there. I think it even gives little points, So this is good, but iNaturalist is fantastic as well. So use whichever one you like the most. They're all really good. This is just one of them. The field guide I have pictured here, which is this one, and it's on this slide. That's one of my absolute favorites. It's really, really good. It is missing a couple dragonflies. So this one by Kathy, what's her last name again? Biggs, Kathy Biggs, right there, lives in Sebastopol, or used to live in Sebastopol. That's a
She
really
created the list for our Osborne Preserve.
Yes, she's really phenomenal. And there's a bunch of other field guides, and we can send those to you later in our resource list. But I would suggest having several field guides and several apps because they're all good in their own way. This is Kathy Biggs' website where you can order the books. Some of these are out of print, but there are several that are still in print. She also has step-by-step instructions for how to build your own dragonfly pond in your backyard on this website. So just a couple more slides, folks. So dragonfly conservation, I've underlined the biggest problems and then the best ways to sort of address them. It's really like everything else, right? Habitat destruction, habitat development, water quality is a big issue. Riparian buffers that are removed because that affects water quality. If you remove all the trees from the edge of a stream, the stream gets hotter, erosion and pollution and silt goes in because the plants aren't stopping it. The most important thing you can do, honestly, is protect and preserve local and regional natural areas and parks. Having a pond in your backyard is great, and there's resources here for that. That does make a difference. But honestly, the best thing you can do is protect existing wetlands and rivers and marshes and streams, whole systems. That's what's best, especially for the dragonfly habitat specialists. Maintain riparian buffers. Make sure people are not mowing right down to the edge of a lake or a pond or a stream or a river. That's where those adult dragonflies are hanging out. Feather River watershed, one of the largest watersheds in Northern California, full of a gazillion dragonflies because they have riparian buffers. They have lots of diversity of wetlands. They have extensive protected natural areas, so their watersheds are protected and safe. Other important natural areas to protect: Laguna de Santa Rosa, Point Reyes, Russian River, Marin Headlands, all of those have wetland areas that are important for dragonflies. And then some even more specific ones, the Modini Preserve, Galbraith Preserve, Mount Tam and Mount Lassen, Osborne Preserve, protecting those areas so that the whole watershed can stay healthy for dragonflies and everything else. One reason it's important to take care of even mountains and hills and large corridors is because dragonflies migrate. They need healthy, intact mountain ranges and uplands and forests because they will migrate 100 miles a day. In the United States, at least 13 of those 307 species migrate, probably many more. In the Bay Area, we know there are at least 7 species that migrate, including this one, the wandering glider, that will fly all the way from India to Africa and end up in North America. They fly around the whole globe. Why they're called globe skimmers. Really fascinating research. People have been crazy gluing radio transmitters onto the common green darner. As you can see in this picture, this is universities and scientists doing this together. That's how we know they can fly 100 miles in a day. This species also lives in California. So there's migration taking place all around the country. This is wonderful research you can be involved in to keep track of dragonfly migration that gives us an idea of the health of those populations. Specific species have been chosen that are in almost every state, so everyone can participate and are relatively easy to identify. You can go to this link and it tells you how to do it. This is another really cool scientific research project that involves universities and high school students and adult volunteers and park staff. It's put together by USGS, the United States Geological Survey, and National Park Service. It's in all 50 states, and they're very active in California. They are testing how much mercury is in our systems by testing dragonfly larvae, because mercury gets into the air, gets down into the water, into plants, and then into the dragonfly larva food web and food chain. And then the results are shared by USGS and national park scientists around the country. And again, they're very active in California, so this could be a really neat thing for you all to get involved in. This is the last slide, and we can do more questions if people want. This is a really good book. In addition to Kathy Biggs' website, this book will take you step by step how to make a dragonfly pond in your backyard, maintenance tips, step by step for creating it. And then I've just listed some tips here when you're thinking about a dragonfly pond. Sunny, not shady, shallow, not deep. It's more of a wetland or marshy pool than it really is a pond. Lots of perching structure, vegetation and sticks. No fish, because the fish are going to eat the dragonfly larva. So how do you control the mosquitoes? Well, the dragonflies do a lot of it themselves. Also, if you have anything that makes the water move or ripple, you can buy little things to help move the water a little bit, circulate it. Mosquitoes don't like that. You can get little BT rings or dunks. You can order them on Amazon. It's a naturally occurring bacteria. It's not a pesticide. It's a naturally occurring bacteria that will attack and feed on only mosquito larvae. It doesn't go after dragonfly larvae, mayfly larvae, salamander fish. People use it in bird baths. It will just go after the mosquito larvae. Okay. So we've gone over a little bit. Carrie?
Wow, people are just giving so many wonderful comments. Wonderful presentation. They want these links. So are these going to be sent out afterwards?
I will be sure to send to you and Margot. I will put together all of the links and resources, and just so that people will have that. Yes.
So many useful things here. And one person asked a really good question about the apps that you're talking about for ID is, can we find a guide on how to photograph Odonata for ID? Like, for example, with plants, you should get the top of the flower, the side of the flower, the leaf underside, things that people might not know right away. So what is that for dragonflies? What features?
Sure. Well, first of all, almost every dragonfly field guide author is also a photo nerd like myself. So if you look in any of these dragonfly field guides, there are several pages on exactly how to photograph dragonflies.
Okay.
And then real quick, you want to get as many angles as possible. There's no straight answer because to identify some dragonflies, you need a side photo, a photo of their face, and a photo from the top. So you just kind of do the best you can and hope that your pictures. But some dragonflies, it's the marks on the side of their thorax or the spots between their eyes on their face. So you take as many angles as you can.
Or even wing venation, right?
Right. Sometimes you have to look under a microscope at the angle of the wing venation.
Well, we are going to stay on longer for questions, but just a very quick wrap up with some things I hope everybody stays on for. Please help me in giving Kevin a huge round of applause. That was just such a fantastic, fact-filled, action-packed, skill-building talk. I'm just so grateful for you to be here, Kevin, once again, spending all that time making that lovely presentation. So thank you very, very much. As I mentioned before, this is just one of several events being offered for free by the Center for Environmental Inquiry this spring. And I'm going to put a link in the chat right now where you can find the upcoming events and recordings of past events. And just as a reminder, this was recorded and it's going to be posted on the event page. Our next program is some in-person event at the Galbraith Preserve. Woohoo, back on site. It's called Manage Woodlands for Wildfire, and it's held Saturday, March 26th. And it is in Mendocino County, but it's just over the border. So it's not as far as you think if you're in Sonoma, and I really encourage you to go. There's going to be a lot of experts at that talk. The one after that will be live from the field, Climate Change at the Land-Sea Interface. That's a virtual event. It's only an hour, and it's really targeting college classes or high school students. And if you are a faculty or a teacher, please take a look at that website. There's an instructor guide, there's a resources document, and you can integrate it into your course curriculum and use the recording as such later. It really was developed with this NSF grant for creating virtual field experiences and connecting with researchers when you can't be there in person. So it's a really great way to bring into your classroom. Other than that, I just want to thank everyone here today also because your questions were fantastic. Your comments are still coming in. So I'm going to wrap up and say goodbye.